Everyone, and welcome to InvenTank, the show for inventors where I'm joined by a special guest host each week for some fun conversation and to help answer all of your burning invention questions. I'm your host, Lisa Lloyd, and we're streaming live today, or you may be catching the replay on Spotify, Pandora, or iHeart. InvenTank is made possible by the Invention Accelerator, helping inventors to cut the painful learning curve and invent wow products, protect them properly, and get in front of the right people at the right companies to pitch like a pro for license. In a moment, we'll begin taking questions, so feel free to drop them in the comments at any time throughout our program today, and we'll take them in the order that they're received. But first, let's get to know my guest host today, Alan Amron. You may not have heard his name, but I'm willing to bet you've seen his inventions or some iteration of them. Alan has been granted over 41 utility patents and 17 design patents, which have grossed well over $250 million in total revenue. Just to name a few, the Presson Memo, which is known to the world today, or by the world today, as Postit Notes by 3M, the photo wallet licensed to Nikon, the first battery-operated water gun for 7 major toy companies. I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. That earned him $250,000 in royalties within the first year. And I'm starting to get into toys, so I can't wait to learn more about that. And your newest venture, Alan, the Mark Laser, used by the NCAA National Track and Field Championship at University of Oregon, which must be very exciting for you. Oh my God, I don't know where to start, but thank you for being here, Alan.
My pleasure. Nice to be with you.
I know you're joining us from the road or you couldn't have made it at all. So I really appreciate you making it possible for us, even sitting in your car. These do go by really fast, though. You'll be blown away because the questions and just the conversation are so much fun. Let me just start by saying you're an idea machine, which we're birds of a feather. I have more ideas than I know what to do with or the time or money to even pursue. I'm sure you can relate to that. How do you know when to pull the trigger? Like, this idea is the one. This is a good one. I need to go for it.
It's not even something you think about when you're an inventor or I don't want to say a known inventor, but when you're a real inventor and you come up with an idea, you can't let it go. I mean, if you really believe in it and you see that it hasn't been done before, the more you work on it, the more excited you get. And there's no trigger. It's just a flow until you get to a point if you find it's been done before, that shuts you off right away. Then you lose it, and then you go on to your next project. But it's not a trigger for me. For me, it's just if I come up with an idea and I like it, I'll look around to see if it's there or not. If it's not, I get more excited. I tell people about it, I get more excited, and then it's just happening. There's no trigger. It just keeps going.
I remember when I first started inventing, I was only 23. When did you get started?
Actually, I was 9 years old when I made my first invention. It wasn't a real. Yeah, but it wasn't a real invention. To me, it was an invention. But what I did was I took a block of wood, a furring strip, they call it, and I put a wall switch on the bottom to make it like a trigger. I put a light on the front of it, a light bulb, and I used batteries as my chamber, and I made it look like a gun. And when you pull the trigger, the light on the front comes on. To me, I invented a new toy, you know?
So you've always been a problem solver. When did you make it a business?
When I first invented the Presson Memo in 1972, I also invented something called the Rasco temperature alarm system, which is being used in blood banks and hospitals and supermarkets and frozen food warehouses all over the world. And in that same year, my father gave me money to start the refrigeration alarm company that I invented, and I went to invention trade shows to show it, and that's where, when I did my press-on memo, I also had my battery-operated water gun and the third invention. All I did in that 1972-73 were 3 inventions, and it happened to be the press-on memo, which is today the Postit Note. It was the battery-operated water gun, which I made millions of dollars on in royalty, and the third one was the alarm system for refrigeration, which I invented as of sort of out of a need. My father owned a supermarket, sort of, and his meat freezer went out, and he lost all his meat because they didn't have an alarm to let them know in the middle of the night the freezer broke down. So those were the three inventions I invented, and I started making money on my father's invention right away because he actually put it into his stores, and people that had supermarkets at the time liked it, and I started a business and started making money. The Presson Memo I showed at the invention show. 3M came over and looked at it and liked it. The battery operated water gun, not too many people came around to look at it. They didn't think it was very, as a matter of fact, it was in the news at the trade show I was at. The local news came in and did a video of me shooting the water gun into their camera, and then they said there were silly inventions at this invention show called a battery operated water gun. They made fun of it, but that one I made hundreds of millions of dollars in sales and millions of dollars in royalty on. So yeah, it was 1973 or 74 when I invented three things that I started making money from right away.
So you ventured with your dad, you licensed with the toy, and then you had the Presson Memo. Tell us about what happened there. And for anybody who might be confused because they've heard about 3M being the inventor.
Right. Well, what happened was in 1972, 73 at this invention show, I had samples of my press-on memo, and I had samples of the glue that I used. I actually put it into a spray can. In those days, they didn't have spray adhesives. I
Wow.
put it in a spray can so I could make the pads. In other words, I would have blank pieces of paper, and I'd spray the top of the line, and I'd keep spraying them, and then I put them together in a pad, and that's how I was selling them. And at this trade show, these two executives from 3M came over, and they introduced themselves. And I thought at that point my life was going to be, that's it. I found my niche in life.
Cha-ching.
That was it. Cha-ching, yeah. And they loved it. They thought it was amazing, and they wanted samples. They agreed to keep it confidential. They brought it back to their 3M laboratories where they tested it, and they evaluated it, and they found a couple of weeks later, they told me they couldn't do it because two silly things. One, you can't print glue, which is ridiculous. You can print glue. And second one was it would be $9.99 per pad, a pack of pads, which, by the way, that's how much they are still today. And they were $9.99 then, so that was a lot of money. So they
Wow.
passed on it. Then a couple of years later, I found that my son and I were watching TV, and we saw in the space shuttle that the astronaut had a little sticky note pad that he put a note on the cockpit while he was floating around in space. And then my son says to me, "Dad, that's your invention. That's your press-on memo." So I contacted the company that made it, which happened to have been 3M. I told them that I met with them and I disclosed this to them, and they didn't answer me at first. So I sued them. And when I sued them, they answered me right away and settled right away. So that was my initial experience with 3M.
And the settlement was in part to get your reputation back, right? Because you had been claiming to be the inventor for this, and all of a sudden they were claiming.
Not at first. No, they didn't claim. They weren't even making it in 1970. I think they started making it in 1977, and they didn't make a press-on or a Postit Note. They made something called a press and peel. The press and peel was a bookmark. It wasn't to write notes in, it was to mark a page in a book. And that's what they invented. That's what the inventor at 3M that claims to have invented the Postit Note invented in 1970, I think 73, a year after I showed it to 3M. They didn't make a Postit Note until 1980 something. And that's when I claimed that I was the inventor of that, and you didn't invent that. You invented a bookmark. You didn't invent the Postit Note. I know for anybody that doesn't know about inventions, the utility of invention is the important part of the invention. That's what you file a patent on. That's what you invented. It's the utility of it, not just necessarily the name. Postit Note I didn't invent. Presson Memo I called it. And I didn't invent a bookmark. I invented a Postit Note, which is what they later claimed that they invented, which they didn't. They invented the bookmark.
Well, I'm glad to get it straight. I know that I've read books and articles and plenty of things online about the story of how the Post-it note evolved from the bookmark. But until I discovered you, I had no idea what the real story was. So, how has that impacted you, or has it maybe not at all, with regard to being worried or paranoid or afraid that people will steal your ideas like most inventors are?
It made me more like I tell inventors now, don't keep your ideas to yourself. Don't be worried about telling people as long as you document it. That's what I did with 3M, not even knowing when I was a kid and I invented the Presson Memo and I showed it to 3M. I documented my whole experience with them. That way, when I sued them, I showed them all my proof and they said, hey, you know what? This guy's not going away. We need to settle with him right away. And I'm talking about 10 days. I sued them on a
Wow.
certain day. They settled 10 days later. Now, normally, if
Oh,
I was older and more mature, I wouldn't have settled
yeah.
because I didn't realize that. You see, I thought I'd have a million ideas in my head and I could sell this one for 10,000, that one for 10,000, and keep coming up with ideas. It stops. You don't always come up with ideas. So try to cherish the deal you're going to make and make the best deal you can. I didn't. I didn't make a good deal on my first time around.
Hindsight's always 2020.
Absolutely.
It's a double-edged sword though, because I think the older and more experienced I get, the smarter I am about this business. But the flip side of that is that I think dismiss ideas much more quickly. Whereas when I was younger, I didn't dismiss anything. And if I knew then what I know now, I may have blown off some of those ideas thinking they
Yeah,
weren't good enough.
when
So
you invent, if you're a good inventor, you'll realize that if you invent something that's inevitable, work on it, because even if it's not going to be today, like I invented the photo wallet 2 or 3 years before the wallet was supposed to be coming out, but I did
right.
it anyway and I caught up. I didn't have a whole lot of time to make money from it, but I made some money from it because I didn't give up on it. You don't give up because it's not the right time for it. You work on it and you try to, for example, with my photo wallet, the chips that we were using were called smart media in those days. The smart media chips had 4 megabytes on them. 4 megabytes doesn't hold maybe more than 2 pictures. So to have a player that I invented to just have 2 pictures on it was like people saying, what are you wasting your time for? Nobody's going to want to just show 2 pictures. I want to show 1,000 pictures. Well, today you could show a whole entire 12 or 15 movies
Right.
on the same chip. That was those days. So if something's inevitable, progress and battery life and the density of the chips, everything works into your favor as the inventor of this player that uses the battery life, uses the chip life, the quantity density. So you got to wait for sometimes other things to catch up to your invention.
It's interesting too because I think that I have 100 questions in my head about the your deal with Nikon too. So I'm trying not to lose my mind over all of them. Um, Being speculative inventing and speculating that that's the future. It's obvious you as best as you can. No one has a crystal ball. It to me is a lot like people who buy domains and park them because they expect someone to want to buy that URL someday and to make bank on it. The question is, how long is it going to take? How futuristic is your thinking? And if it takes a long time and you don't have the patience or the money, the runway for that, so to speak, one way or the other, if you need to turn it around and make money on it right away, um, you might
Well,
blow it up. But
on the
you
money on the money part of it, I have something that works for me my entire life. When I come up with a good idea, the best way to tell how good the idea is try to get a partner that has money to invest in it. Don't own it 100% yourself because then you'll lose 100%. If you have a partner, you have a better chance of being successful. So in every one of my inventions, even when I had money, I took in an investor because you never know whether it's going to make it or not, and you might as well share if it does make it. And it's a good feeling to share with a partner that put up the money and you put up the idea because you're a team. So even for the drawings and for the prototypes and for all the expenses of travel and to promote it, having a partner with the money is the best way to do it. This way you don't have to worry about, well, I don't have money to do drawings. I don't have money to get a lawyer. I don't have money to file a patent. Get a partner that's got the money, that likes your idea, and you're giving them something and they're giving you something, and that makes your life a lot easier. My whole life I did it like that.
I am in the opposite camp, but before we dig into that too much more, I know the question on everybody's mind is going to be, where do you find those partners? How does someone who doesn't know anybody, they're just going about their day and they figure this thing out, they think, aha, they don't know who to turn to. What do they do?
Best way is to go into the industry you invented it. Don't go to a family member, because they'll like what you're doing because of your being your family. But like, for example, if you invent something in the stationery industry, which I did, I invented Presson Memo. I went and got a partner who was in the stationery business. I went to him with my idea to sell him the idea to sell in his store. He said, I think this is the greatest thing in the world. I want to invest in it. He was my investor. You go into the industry you invent in, because those people know better than even you whether that's an invention that's worth going anywhere with. And if they like it, they'll put their money where their mouth is, and plus they'll help you, because you don't know the stationery industry. You only know your invention. You don't know the stationery industry. He does. He could help you.
So how much, if there is an average, or maybe a range would be a better way to frame the question, how much of a range does it typically cost that you would need a partner for all of the things that you would need to do from when you have the idea to when you license it, for example?
Well, of course, nothing to put it on the napkin and to think of the idea. Then you need to put it from that napkin, you got to put it into a drawing that you could show to other people, like an investor or somebody you're trying to sell it to in a store or whatever, of what it's going to look like when it's finished. Then you need to make a prototype. Prototypes cost more money than drawings. Drawings are probably anywhere from $150 to $500, depending on how detailed you want to get. Interesting story on my Presson Memo. The artist that did all my artwork, which I have in my book, pictures of the artwork, was done by the guy that did the drawings for Benihana restaurants throughout the world. He was
Wow.
the artist just starting out. He was hired by Rocky Aoki, who owned Benihana's, to do drawings. And he heard about me. He called me up and says, I'll do the drawings for you, and I won't even charge you. I'll just take like 5% of your invention or something like that. So things like that. You can make deals also. If you don't have a partner with money, you can give partners percentage, like a patent lawyer a percentage. If your idea is good enough, the artist will do it, the patent attorney will do it, and certainly somebody in the industry would invest money if they know about it.
Wow. So Deb is asking, do you partner with inventors?
Not, I partnered with inventors a couple of times in my life because I was working on a project that I really loved. And then I found that some guy had a patent on it, and that guy was doing nothing with it. So I
Yeah.
contacted him. I gave him like $5,000, which he thought was gold. Any inventor that has a patent that's not doing anything would like
Right.
love to have a partner. So I
Right.
gave him $5,000 and a 50-50 deal, which is great. No, most people wouldn't do that. And I ended up owning that patent with him, and then we had to litigate with the company over it and stuff. And that's usually what happens. It was a really great idea. And I mean, I could tell you about it because I wrote about it a little bit in my book. It was the Super Soaker water gun. The Super Soaker water gun made billions of dollars, and the patent of the water gun was not invented by Lonnie Johnson, the guy that claims to have invented it. Lonnie Johnson invented a Super Soaker water gun that when you pump it up, it shoots a pulsating stream like a water gun normally shoots, sprays that come
Right.
out like that. That was what he patented. A year after, this guy Esposito, his name was Esposito, Gary Esposito. He invented the Super Soaker, where it was a continuous stream. Continuous stream is what the Super Soaker does. It doesn't do the pulsing stream. That's a literal infringement if somebody is making one that goes like this, or if it's a continuous stream. Those are literal. So the patent I bought or partnered with, we went into litigation, and that was over the Super Soaker water gun.
Wow. Okay. Now that story I had not heard. That's
Yeah.
incredible. Oh my. So with regard to how much you talked about different ways that people can partner. And I know Deb and the rest of our audience would still like to know, can they contact you about their inventions to see if you would want to partner? Let's just get that out of the way.
I'm 73 years old. I don't have I do have energy for if I came up with an idea, and if I heard somebody had a really great idea, I have the energy, but I don't have the connections and the contacts I had years ago. That's why I wrote the book. I wrote the book showing my life of how I did all the things when you have the energy and you have connections and how you make connections. When you're 73, all you could do is write a book. It's not the same. I don't have the connections, and that's what it is. The energy I have, the connections I don't.
Well, for those of you who maybe joined us a little bit late, Alan also has an amazing book called The Invented Life, The Smoking Gun. And for our listeners, people who are listening to the replay, I'll just go ahead and read this. I posted it for you all to see. I'm sorry I can't put a link in the chat. Otherwise, I would just make it easy for you to click on. But if you go to tiny URL, I tried to make it easy, tinyurl.com/Alan Amron. That's ALANAMRON. Alan has made his book available to you for free for joining us today. So you can go check that out. I will bring that back up in a moment. But again, it's tinyurl.com/Alan Amron. Okay, so wow. Okay, that whole story just completely blew my mind. Venturing versus licensing. I want to talk to you for 5 hours, not one. Venturing versus licensing. Which do you prefer and why?
Licensing, absolutely. Yeah, licensing. I've been offered a lot of money for a lot of my ideas, and even that lot of money over a period of time, it can't, can't compare it. Getting a royalty is much better.
And of your successes and failures, have you done more of one or the other? Have you done more licensing or more venturing?
I've never done venturing.
Well, you
When
did
you
with
say
your, yeah,
what were
making it and selling it yourself basically versus licensing it.
No. I did it with the Presson Memo when I first started, only because I was trying to sell the invention. But
Right.
I never really went into business to manufacture in
Okay.
anything of any of my ideas, except with the Rasco temperature alarm system.
That was the first one.
Yeah, that one I manufactured only because it wasn't an invention that I got a patent on, and at first I didn't even file a patent on it because it was just like that was a good idea. Let me go and make some money. I wanted to make some money, and that was why I did it. So that one I did. That was my first venture, and that wasn't a license. That was so you're right. I did do one, but that
Okay.
was it. And I got to tell
All
you,
the rest are licensed.
that lasted my entire life. I would get not royalty, but salary and income from that business my entire life while I was inventing. So it's good to have one venture.
Residual, yeah, residuals or
Yeah.
residuals, one way or the other,
Yes.
right? That's what it's good. Good for you. So
Yeah.
it's still passive income. That's incredible. Very
Yeah.
smart. I think we share that gene that is no doesn't mean no, just not that way. We'll figure it out. If I have to go around, up, down, switch, pivot, whatever it is, I'll figure it out.
Called trial and error. That's
It's
what
all
it
trial
is.
and error.
All trial and error.
So when you have an idea and back when you were voracious about going out there and meeting new people to get the deals done, how did you find the right people at the right companies to go about pitching, especially when we're talking about big companies like Nikon?
You go right to the top. I mean, I know it sounds in today's world, it's a little difficult to go to the president and CEO of a lot of companies. But 20 years ago, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, it was very easy to reach the president of all these companies and the CEOs, especially if you had something that was going to make their business better or make them money. So I would go, for example, like when I invented my battery operated water gun, I went to all the top toy companies, to their presidents of their companies. They didn't have invention relations in those days. They didn't have product development people. The president sort of like looked for ideas and came to ideas. So I guess today you would have a product development guy that you'd have to go contact, and it's their job to look for new product. So if you have a new product and you have a patent on it, they'll listen to you. If you have a new product and you don't have a patent on it, they're going to tell you do something to protect yourself first, then come to us, because they don't want a lawsuit. So you're better off filing a patent or a provisional patent, doesn't have to be a utility patent, and then go see a manufacturer, go to like, years ago I went to the president, like I said, but you can go today to the vice president or somebody who's in charge of new product development. And again, my pitch to inventors is these guys, it's their job to find you. Tell them who you are, tell them what you got. And if you're in that industry showing them something and they're not interested, you probably don't have a great idea. I'm not telling you should stop. But if you're in the industry, like you invent something in automotive and you go to an automotive guy who's in charge of looking for new automotive parts and products, and he doesn't like it, you really, I don't even know how to explain that one. That's hard. You gotta like, they gotta like it. I mean, that's part of being an inventor.
Uh-oh. So Alan had another meeting. He's on Long Island right now. And he had to join us from his car because he was in between a meeting that he couldn't get home fast enough to get on the regular computer. So he waited to join us from his car, and it looks like he's dropped out, but I assume he'll get back in here in just a moment. And I want to remind all of our audience that you can drop your questions in the comments at any time, and we'll be happy to address those questions. Alan, you're back. Awesome. Thank you. I'm glad. I figured you just try again, so no problem.
No, you know what happened? Somebody called me and I shut that off, and my picture went away.
I thought it dropped on you.
No.
So how
okay,
do you know, you're right. We have to get in front of them. So I know you've been doing this for so long, and you've never really been in the ecosystem of the inventor world. You've been out there just doing it, charging the line, right? And carving out, I think, a path for a lot of other people behind you. And thank you, by the way, for being that proverbial bushwhacker for all of us and making that path available. You're an OG. You know what that means?
No.
Original. You're like the original inventor. Because now we have inventor communities and clubs and national clubs and national associations and just all these different things that with these best practices, many of which are consistently the right way to go. Some of them I'm not so sure I agree with. But one of them is to create a sell sheet, which is a single piece of paper that very clearly demonstrates the problem and then the solution that yours, like oh no, just like a direct response commercial does. Are you tired of ripping your hair out with this frustration? Well, here's the solution to your problem. Ta-da! We do that with a sell sheet, and usually it'll have a video link in it or something like that to reinforce whatever the message is. What advice would you give to someone using that type of a tool to properly message and communicate effectively to that prospect that wow, the thing that you're talking about, getting them to get excited about it?
Okay, again, drawings, pictures, videos, if you have it. If you could put it all into one PDF, and like you said, that's your sell sheet. Right. And if you could put it in front of somebody and they can instantly see what your invention is. The biggest problem I see with a lot of inventors today, because I'll see, they'll bring me an idea and they'll say, Alan, what do you think of this? Just to get my opinion. And I'll look at it and say, okay, what is it? Tell me. I usually have to ask them to see their patent to understand what it is. And then I say, well, why aren't you just telling them this? Because your invention is this. It's not that. And sometimes I've been blessed in my life to be able, not only to be able to invent, but to create the sales sheet, to create the video, the prototype. I actually am able to know how much it's going to cost to manufacture. These are things that not everybody's going to know, but it's important that you find out these things, because on your PDF, you should know all these things. The biggest pitch thing is, what is it? What did you invent? How is it solving that problem?
And why does it matter? Yep.
And well, that's why it matters. Your invention, that point is and you got to, even if you can't come up with that yourself, ask people, what do you think my invention is? And then they'll tell you, and then you'll get a better idea of how they're seeing it, because you see it a different way completely. But you solve the same problem, you're just not communicating it, and that's very important. Communication is so important.
The whole deal can go sideways real fast, even for a great invention, if you don't effectively communicate what it is.
Absolutely.
Why it matters.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm fortunate in that was kind of built into my DNA also. And I had a lot of sales experience. My first sales job was at 15, and I had great training from wonderful people who cared about their customers. So it wasn't like And no offense to anybody who maybe sells cars, but it wasn't that proverbial used car sales kind of training. It was truly empathetic. And in the same way, I invent and design with that same empathy, and then communicating it becomes easy because I know the why behind it. I know exactly why I invented it, who it's for, why it matters to that person. And if I can just explain that to the next person who's going to pay me for the right to make it and sell it, then
And quickly. You can't take an hour, half. Nobody's got that time.
no.
If you can't explain your invention in, let's say, a minute and a half,
Yeah,
you need
you
help.
missed
You
it.
need somebody to help you. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So let's talk about failure for a minute. It's one of my favorite subjects. We can't be entrepreneurs or inventors more specifically if we're too afraid to fail. Failure is absolutely part of the process. What are some of the biggest failures, or maybe one of the biggest failures that you experienced that you feel like was a great lesson and valuable for you?
Well, I've been pretty lucky. I've had 40 patents, and out of my 40 patents, I licensed like 20 of them. I mean, that's unheard of. If you go to the patent office right now, 98% of the patents that are in the patent office don't make anyone a penny. 98%. That means you're in a 2% area if you license one product. And I've been lucky in my life. And it's not just because of the inventions I invented, which obviously had to have something to do with it. I think it had something to do with my sales ability as well. If you're able to communicate something, you could sell it. You know, even if it's not the greatest in the world. I'll give you an example, and I write this in my book also. I invented something called, I called it no sh SHT. And
You could take
okay,
it.
no, but it's called no
No
SHT. It
shit.
wasn't shit. And what it was is a spray can for when your dog poops on the ground, you spray it, it dissolves it into powder, and
Vaporize.
right, you vacuum it up and it kills the smell. I brought that to Sears Roebuck. I thought that was the greatest idea in the world. Farms could use it, stalls can use it, homes could use it for pets. It was just the greatest thing in the world. And I brought it to Sears Roebuck. In those days, I met with the president of Sears Roebuck, and we brought a dog thing with us, you know, a sample in wax paper in those days, and we opened it up on his desk. Now, here we are on the president of Sears Roebuck's desk in Chicago with this wax paper with a lump of dog
Shit
that
on
stuff on it, and he said to me, "This better work." And so I sprayed my stuff all over it, and all of a sudden it collapsed into a pile of dust. The smell went away, the dust was on there. We vacuumed the dust up, and the guy was like, "Alan, I'm in. What do you need?" And we told him we wanted a license for it, and you know, we were very excited. I came home 2 days later. I get a call from this guy saying, "We can't make the stuff." I said, "Why?" He says, "Because if the dog sniffed it after we made it into powder, he would have died. We used an active enzyme." I'm not a chemist, so I went to chemists afterwards too to try to make it. To today, we have not been able to make a product that the dog wouldn't die after he sniffed it or after he ate the dust. But it's a great idea, a wonderful idea. That was a failure.
And so in hindsight, what would you tell your younger self now at the time of inventing it?
That it's impossible, but go have a good time.
Well,
Go to
so what's
Chicago.
interesting is I see the takeaway for me, and thank you for sharing that, because it's exactly the type of failure we're talking about. And I think the way that it becomes palatable for me and almost even energizes me, failure, is when I get something really meaningful or valuable out of it. And in this case, the learning for me would be make sure that you know that there aren't going to be any FDA challenges or health related, because it is an aerosol. So, you know, just some basic common sense around that. Go check with the experts on that to make sure in advance before you spend all that time and money on it. But you couldn't have known that before, right?
No, you can't know
So,
that before.
but I
I
bet
mean,
you wouldn't make that mistake again.
well, it wasn't a mistake. The chemist that made it for us, because obviously I couldn't make that
You
stuff
trusted
myself.
them. Yeah.
I trusted him to tell me that it was safe. He said it is safe, and thank God I didn't taste it because
Wow.
but it was an active enzyme, and that's the reason why it dissipates so fast. Because an active enzyme can eat away at anything and make it a powder and kill the odor. So we couldn't figure out another way You're right. If I, but I still would have gone to Chicago. That experience. I mean, I was
It
like
was great.
24 years old. You can't meeting the president of Sears Roebuck and putting a lump of stuff on his desk. That was like an experience I had. I'll
Of a
never forget it.
lifetime.
Yeah,
Okay,
really.
folks. I hope that what you're seeing is the pattern here with Alan. He is an optimist, but realistic all at the same time. He understands the mechanics, the nuts and bolts and steps to take, but he doesn't depend on success to be the optimist. He's optimistic even when it's not getting licensed. And that's what keeps him motivated and keeps him going. And I hope that that's a big takeaway for some of our listeners today.
Also, Lisa, it's not. It's not. I never did it for the money. I don't. I don't invent and say, "Oh, I'm going to be a rich guy." I'm not. I never ever. That's one gene I never got. I never got the money gene. I never learned how to deal with money. I never had to make. I only made money, like my father used to say to me. The only reason why you're making money is because you're selling more than you're selling product like for more than it's really supposed to be worth. For example, if it cost me $1, I'm selling it for 7 and I'm making money. So, but it's not because I figured it out like that. It's just
Right.
because it happened like that. So it's important to know, don't, if you're going in thinking only to make money, I don't know if that's such a great idea. Sometimes seeing your product in a store is more gratifying. I know people are going to differ on this one, than actually making money from it. Because making money from an idea happens, but not as often as being able to see your product in a store, which is a thrill. Also, I have people like Robert De Niro and Brad Pitt that played with my inventions in the news. So you'll see Brad Pitt playing with one of my water guns. You'll see Robert De Niro playing with one of my water guns. That's worth $1 million to me. I mean, that's very
Boy,
exciting to see. Yeah, they're enjoying something I created, which is very exciting. I like that. And
pure
the
joy.
money part, you need money to live. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that can't be your only goal.
That's exactly right. I think that when you can find a way to just do what you love, the money is a part of it. It'll come. You have to be smart about it, but you do it
Absolutely.
because you love it first, and then the money shows up. And that
Right.
I do see that when I first started, and I had 7 successes, right? So one right after the other in the first 10 years, and about, and everyone wanted me to come talk at their clubs or newspapers, whatever, TV shows, and they all wanted to know what the secret of the success was. And I didn't know. I just knew I loved it and I was doing it and I could tell you what I did, but I couldn't tell
That
you when it worked.
But that's the secret. That the secret is you got to be natural about it. Your energy, people know whether you're telling the truth or whether you're just trying to sell something.
Bullshit.
I
Yeah.
never I never went in to sell something. I went in to explain it. And
Explain
I
it.
have excitement in me to explain it perfectly.
Right.
Even when I partnered with people like at the NFL with inventions I did, they always said, okay, you're the inventor. We got it now. Go home. And then all of a sudden they say, Alan, you need to come in here. We need your excitement. We need you to come in and sell this to the NFL. Because the salespeople, they try to sell it. I don't. I just go in, explain my
And
idea
educate
with
them.
my energy, and that's what sells it.
Right on. Okay. Let's balance this out with the other side of this, which is I've been consulting for 30 years, and my heart literally ached so hard for people. I remember in the early days crying, being so frustrated because I wanted to make it happen for them. But they didn't have those really great ideas. They were good, and they may have even made sense for them to invent for themselves and their friends and family, but they weren't a business. How do you balance that? What would you say to anybody who has all that passion, but none of their products? In fact, I'll just point this out also. One of our LinkedIn users posted, guess how many products not yet produced were licensed by 3M of over 3,500 presented? 0. So that's 3,500 products that were presented, 3,500 no's. At some point, when do you say, maybe I'm doing something wrong or I'm not cut out for this?
Well, yeah, like you said before, you got to be realistic about it. I mean, if it gets to the point, if everybody tells you they don't like it, and you don't find at least one person you could rely on that tells you, you got to keep going. I have a feeling this is going to be something interesting. And also, it has to be inevitable. Everything that you invent, if it's going to be successful, needs to be inevitable. Someday, it may not be today, but someday it's definitely going to be used by the world. Not every invention can say that. Most inventions could be humdrum, normal, everyday, something that may not be inevitable. I tend to stay with things that are inevitable and fortunately never been done before. Some people invent and say, well, I invented it, but that guy's is different than mine. It's not different than yours. It's just a little tweak maybe, but it needs to be completely different. If it's completely different, you got a chance. If it's something that's just a little change, I don't believe that's an invention. And you know what? You said something before also. A website name that you're holding to say somebody will want it someday, that's not an invention. People think that's an invention. That's not an invention. It's like maybe a marketing thing where you got a name of something. So people have to know what an invention is. An invention is something of utility, something that you could use, something that could, like you said, solve a problem or benefit somebody in some way.
You said you have, well, I know you mentioned on LinkedIn anyway, maybe it's changed, over 41 utility patents and 17 design, right? How do you choose which to get and when or why?
Well, I personally don't. I have design patents on things like I called it the video page. It's now called the iPad. I have the photo wallet, which is today known to the world as the iPhone. I mean, I have design patents on that stuff, but because my buttons are on different places, it's completely different. I don't really, I don't like design patents. I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't get a design patent, but I don't like design patents. I say utility all the way. Don't waste your time on a design patent. Although I have like a lot of them, none of them are worth anything. None. Even the ones that I made money on are not worth anything. My utility patents will always be worth something until they expire.
Yeah. I was really talked out of design patents in the early days and absolutely obstinate about it. Just don't even talk to me about them until the inventor of the scrunchie, the hair tie, these elastic things with the fabric all around them, called me at like 4 o'clock in the morning because she had licensed to the same company I had. And she called me with ulcers and just stressed out of her mind because they weren't paying her. And she had design patents and they were paying her, but they were not paying her on the brand name. It wasn't the product. So I'm not going to get into much of that story, but they weren't paying her everything that they owed her. And then she explained to me that the product, which they were paying her on, just had a design patent on it. And shortly thereafter, she went on to change the design. So the seam, instead of it going around the interior of the circle, she put a seam that just went around the outside of the elastic in a different direction, and got a second design patent and went and licensed that to Goody. So the first one was Wisconsin. So they were competing against each other and she had patents on both, and they were just design patents, which is just crazy to me. But typically, and that's why I think it's important to keep in mind that there's a perspective and a time for it. But I completely agree with you. Utility is always going to be much stronger, broader, wonderful protection. In fact, I have a couple products that have both utility and design on them for that reason, just to even further insulate.
Yeah, I used to do it all. Whenever I did a utility, I did designs around them, and I did the variations of designs around them. But then I found, like, okay, look at the iPhone. Okay, it's exactly the diagram. The only difference is my buttons are over here, not over here, or there's no buttons here. And all they got to have is one little minor difference, and it's completely different.
So that digital page, which became the tablet, for example, or the iPhone, how prophetic were you? How long did it take from when you filed the patent application to when they actually came out with it?
I came out with it in 1990 on both of those products, the video page and the photo wallet. Steve Jobs came out with it in 1997 or 98, 8 years later, with the iPhone and the iPad, which were the exact same things that I had when I was doing it, but their variations and their differences and they're very skilled at making it about the internet, not about pictures, about this and not about that, you know. So they made a lot of differences, and I never even went there with them. I mean, it was not even worthwhile. I made the money I made with Nikon, and after that, the iPhone, which I think is the greatest thing in the world, and the iPad, I think that's terrific too. My video page wasn't as great as those, but it was those in their infancy when they first. I'll get a quick story. I took my I I call it the iPad now, but it was the video page. I took the video page into a bank to get money. That's how good it was in 1990. Nobody knew of an iPad or an iPhone, but I had it, a video page, which I built a prototype on, brought it into a bank meeting, and they unanimously gave me $3 million to start a company. But they wanted the company to be run by their CEO, whoever they hired, because I admitted I wasn't a CEO. I'm an inventor, and they never really. Just giving you an example of my video page in 1990, going into a bank meeting, showing them the video page. They were able to actually hold it in their hand like an iPad. Can you imagine 10 years before the iPad? That blew them all away. They loved it. They wanted to put the money in right away. They did. And the rest is in my book.
So you have to read about it in the book, which I'll pop
Gotta
that up
read
in
about
just a moment. But let's
Yeah.
take a question here. Jenny, who, by the way, is a member of the Invention Accelerator. Hi, Jenny. Would you send your sell sheet before you get on the call with a contact, a prospective licensee? She's asking.
Yes, I do. Once you look, if you have a patent filed and you did a PDF, you want the whole world to see it. Publish it in a newspaper. What do you care? Because anybody that's going to make it has to prove they made it before you did. And they can't if they took it out of the newspaper or they took it out of the email that you sent them. Plus, whoever you send it to, document who you send it to.
So when you're in a real practical, tactical sense here, you have this product, you know the person at Nikon that you want to bring it to, for example. Do you call them, try and book an appointment? Do you send an email first with your sell sheet attached? What's your process?
Okay, well, first of all, I've started the invention with my contact at Kodak. I went to Kodak through one of their sales guys that knew me. And I told them I need to see their big people up at the top about this great invention I have. And when he told them about my photo wallet, they freaked out because they were working, and I didn't know this at the time, they were working on the digital camera. So was Nikon. They didn't introduce the digital camera to the world yet. And here I was making a player for a digital camera, which I didn't know that was coming out either. And so Kodak was working on it for 6 months, and they were like, having problems with internally of their own, not of my product. And I got a phone call from Nikon Camera, who was on Long Island where I lived, and said, come up to my office. Maybe you got other ideas you could show me. And I went up there and I met with the guy from Nikon, and he said to me, why isn't Kodak making it? If we had it, we'd make it tomorrow. This is the greatest thing. I said, you know what? I'm going to call Kodak. Maybe they'll give it back to me. Turns out Kodak had like money problems or something, and they didn't think that the digital film was going to outsell the real film, so they weren't going to go into that strong. So they gave me back the product. I went to Nikon, and then the rest is history. Nikon made it within 6 months after that. It was on the market.
Wow, we have a little more than 10 minutes left. So I want to remind our audience, if you have any questions, drop them in the comments and we'll get to them before we wrap up. And remember, there's a time delay. So the sooner you can get those in for us, the better. You tell a story. I saw your video, your talk, I think it was at Stanford, and you wore the gold tie. You showed some videos and mentioned that with that product, you were hiding under the table because the batteries, like the technology didn't even exist yet for you to demonstrate it. And here it was about to be on television. Can you share that story with us?
Yeah, Nikon bought a booth at the show, the electronic show in Las Vegas, which is the biggest electronic show in the world. And I thought we were going to get lost with one little product there. So Nikon took a 10-foot by 10-foot booth. They put me and one other guy in it, and we had samples of our photo wallet, which was blowing people away because nobody would even had digital cameras yet, and they wanted to know where we got the digital photos to put on the digital chip. So
Do 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 do.
exactly. So CNN came by, and they said we'd like to feature you on CNN tomorrow morning at 4 a.m. or something. I said that's great. And when you go on CNN, it's not like you go on camera and bing, you're on. It took like 6 hours till they set up their thing, they set up their booth, they set up the cameras, they turned on the lights, and all during that time they wanted my photo wallet to keep showing pictures during that entire time. I said that's impossible. My batteries only last 10 minutes. So they said, okay, is there any way you could connect more batteries? I said, yeah. I went underneath the table. I have the video. If you saw the video, you'd see there's a table, and the CNN announcers are talking about the products on the table. I was under that table with batteries, and I kept changing the batteries every 5 minutes, and I had a monitor down there, so I was able to see that my thing was working. It was nerve-wracking because at 5:30 in the morning, my mother's in New York, and I wanted her to see it.
Oh, it's great though, because you were constantly problem solving. And that's one of the things about being an entrepreneur at all. It
Never
is
stops.
always figure it out, work it out,
Yep.
keep going, talk to people, find out what your options are. Don't quit unless you have evidence that says you should, right?
Right. Which is still, I still wouldn't quit unless the evidence was overwhelming. I
Overwhelming,
wouldn't quit. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So final thoughts here as we wrap up. I cannot believe it's been an hour already. What is your best advice for someone who might be stuck right now, who is convinced they have a great idea, they've gotten a patent pending, they've been created their sell sheet, they're out there trying to pitch it, they may or may not even have a prototype. Most inventors these days don't. They try and cut that particular corner. And they're out pitching, but they're getting ghosted. They're not hearing back from companies when they try and reach out to them. That's the number one problem that I hear. What advice would you have for them?
Well, first of all, if you got to get the right pitch, you got to get, like I said before, if you could explain your idea quickly and simply, and that idea is absorbed by the person that you're trying to hook up with, they'll respond to you right away. Like I said, these guys are looking for new product to make their companies better and sustain them in their line of work. So, and again, stay in that industry. Whatever you've invented, try to stay within that industry because they understand the needs, they understand the problems. And if your invention is going to solve one of their problems or be a product for them, they should get back to you right away. If they don't, it could be a matter of they didn't see it yet. You know, a lot of these guys are very busy. I understand that it could take weeks till they get around to yours. You got to be patient, or don't be patient and follow up. Keep following up.
Keep following. How often would you follow up?
At least once a week. And as it gets further, I get closer and closer, and I almost become pain in the neck because you know what? After a certain amount of time, it's enough. You know, either say yes or no. Give me a yes or give me a no, but don't make me keep waiting.
Right on. So if the answer is no, are you typically able to extract the why behind it, or do you just get a no and that's it?
I find that it's, you know, I've had so many no's in my life to products that I had one big yes for later on that I never really worried about that. I never really, if he said no, I was very gracious about it. I would say to them, oh, thank you very much. I appreciate you getting back to me. I don't want to lose that contact. When you ask them why,
Right.
sometimes that shows a weakness, maybe not. But to me, it was like, I didn't want to be weak. I wanted them to think, oh, well, okay, I got other people that I'm showing it to also, and maybe they'll change their mind. Maybe they never did. I'm just saying that's my mind. For me to keep my confidence, I didn't want them to think that I was weak enough to say why, because their why is not going to mean anything to me because I'm going to say but. and I'm going to give it an answer to the why. I'm not going to live with his why.
So the assumption there, and here's confession of a coach, an invention coach who's been working with it, who has her own success and working with other people who many more people have failed than succeeded. And this industry, you may know 2% success rate. It's awful. So that means that statistically, I can only help, 98% of the time I'm going to fail with my clients. And that's terrifying. But I want to improve that number. And the biggest challenge that I find is when people aren't learning because they don't have that dramatic difference that you talked about earlier. They don't even understand what that means. They don't know where the line of truly dramatic difference is. So they've got these kind of less meaningful inventions that are cute or clever, whatever, but either can't be manufactured because it's not cost effective. It'll never sell for the price that it will cost you to make. All of these other business metrics just don't add up. You intrinsically know those things and build them from the inside out with all of those questions answered from the very beginning. But most people don't, which is why that rate is so little. So what I urge inventors to do is find out, because I don't want to be the one to say, this will never go and here's why. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, right? I want to get you in front of the right people at the right company. And if that person says, this will never work and here's why, I've made you a better inventor. Now you've learned what you need to know to do it better next time because it wasn't as natural for them as it comes to you.
Oh, I agree with you. And you want to know something? I'm honest with inventors too. If an inventor sends me an idea and I say to them, I can't tell what your idea is from your pitch. Tell me what it is. What does it do? And even then, sometimes I don't know what they invented. So I'll say, let me see the patent. Because I could read the patent and understand what their patent is. Just in the abstract, you could tell what the patent is, which is it's in English. And then after I'll read it, I'll say, well, why don't you just tell people it does this? So yeah, I'm honest with inventors too, but I'm talking about when you're going to sell, when you're establishing, because they talk to each other. Like I'm selling CBS, NBC knows the guy, they talk at dinners, Fox talks to NBC. So if you act a little bit weak to one guy, he's going to mention, yeah, Alan asked me what I didn't like about it. I don't want to know from him what he didn't like about it. I want to find out first, are you interested? No? Okay, I'll go to the next guy. So I agree with you from the inventor's point of view to tell them the truth and let them know what the problem is so they could learn from it. But from the customer, I don't know. It almost doesn't matter. I tell you what, 3M told me they can't print ink. How could you lie to me like that? You can print ink, but I was a kid. I thought maybe you can't print ink.
Wow. Yeah. And who knows if it was an outright lie or if it was a half truth or whatever. Right. But yeah, no, there's no convincing someone who's just making excuses. But right. I do also want to know why, not just so that I can learn from it, but that's part of sales. No is yes. I think it was Tom Hopkins or Zig Ziglar that said, no is really just an objection is really just a request for more information. They're not saying no. They're saying, I don't understand well enough. Or otherwise I'd be saying yes.
Right. That's true. That's true.
And your persistence is what drives through those no's because you are overcoming. I think you're learning and discerning the whole time. You probably just don't even realize it because you're just such a natural, which is why it's such a privilege to have you here today. Okay, so that says, last question, Jenny, is it worth more for licensing commission if you have the design for manufacturing? And thank you for being an OG. Now that you know what it means.
Yeah, right. I don't know. It could be, but who has the money to develop the drawings and the diagrams of molds and things like that? I mean, if you got a partner and he partnered with you on your idea and you did that, yeah, companies would love to have, like record labels want a finished record. They'd much rather have a finished record than a demo. So it's the same thing in manufacturing. If you go with a prototype with the molds already designed, which costs a lot of money, sure, manufacturers would be more apt to do it. So yeah, get an investor as a partner and make the molds, make everything if you want.
Oh God, you're gonna give me a heart attack saying that.
Why, that's not good.
Oh, it's not bad. There's no judgment. My fear is that it falls on the ears of someone who doesn't understand it in context. If you have not properly vetted the idea, for example, some of these people like I talk about, 98% of them, remember, they're not inventing really wow solutions. You're in the 2% because you keep inventing. You're futuristic, you're problem solving, you're cost effective, you understand the business mechanics of this, all of that in addition to your passion. But most people don't. They have the passion, but they don't have those mechanics down. And the result is they end up spending $1 million to fail instead of maybe $5,000 to fail. And that's what scares me for them. It's not that I don't agree with you.
But Jenny Moore is asking the question that would she get more in licensing if she delivered them design drawings and stuff like that? And I'm saying, yeah, you would get more because you can negotiate better if you're giving them more. So yeah, but I agree with you too, that unless your idea is rock solid and sold, making molds is a really waste of time.
Big risk. Yeah, it's just risk is all it is. And that's okay if you've got the $1 million to lose.
Right.
Or you and your investor, which by the way, I had 7 investors when I did Shark Tank, and I felt beyond measure pain and suffered a lot for costing them that money, because these are friends and family.
They're big boys.
It was devastating. I know, and I had to get over it. And I don't know that I'll ever be completely, but my point is just, I mean, it sucks to lose someone else's money as much as it really does suck. If you care at all about the people who are giving it to you, then it sucks. So yeah, vet your ideas, folks. That's the moral of that story. Everything else will fall into line, like Alan is saying, whether it's how far you need to go. I'm working on a mop right now. The mop, originally I showed it to a bunch of mop companies and they all loved the idea, but didn't want to go through that R&D process. And then I found a DR TV company who said, okay, we'll do it, but you have to finish it, but we will license it. So I was like, all right, fine. I'll just go ahead and finish it. Well, 2 years later, while I'm still figuring it out, because they knew it was a big task, and sure enough, it is, especially for an independent inventor. Now that it's finally getting finished, I'm going to go back to those mop companies because that was the only thing standing in the way, and they're a better fit than the DR company anyway, right? So, and then we'll see if they were telling the truth, that they loved it or not.
See, and going back to those same people, that you didn't ask them why,
I did. I wouldn't have known that what they needed was. I was just like, oh, that's fine. I wasn't trying to talk them out of their no. I just wanted to learn from the no. What do I need to do? What would make?
But isn't it a natural instinct if somebody says no because of, and you say, oh, but mine, it's a natural instinct. Yeah.
Yes. When I was younger, oh, absolutely. I needed to talk you into everything that I wanted.
Exactly.
No, I've learned that sometimes no is good.
Yeah.
And there's logic behind it. And so I'd rather understand the no. And if I agree with you, you're right, this isn't a good fit, I'd rather not waste my time any more than you would. So that's why I like to understand the why. But if you're wrong, if it is an objection that I need to fix because I miscommunicated something, then you better believe I'm going to fix that before I hear the next and get another no before I walk away.
but just a final note, an inventor, a true inventor, because I've done it on the fly and I'm sure you have too. Even if you say no and why, I got an answer right now for you.
Yeah, my answer is I'm going to go make it and prove it.
Or if they tell you because it doesn't do this, I'll say yes, but it does do that. And even if I didn't do it before he told me that, I am able to do it now.
Yeah, then I don't fit that description, I guess, of the true. Well, maybe I would. I mean, I suppose if it made sense and they're right, I guess I would go pivot, iterate,
of course,
and improve it. Yeah, sure. Because that learning taught me that this is why it needs to be better. So here's what I can fix. Oh, absolutely. I get you.
It's inventing on the fly, by the way.
Yeah, on the fly. Totally, like sitting under a table and putting batteries in. If that's what you got to do, that's what you got to do.
That's right.
You're the best. Thank you, Alan, so much for being here. I can't believe we're over our time here, so I have to wrap things up. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. If you've enjoyed the show today, please help us get the word out, and you can share this video, what you saw today, either with your networks on the same social platform or wherever you think people might enjoy or benefit from the information that we've shared today. You can also check us out on Spotify, iHeart, and Amazon. And when you subscribe to our show on any of those channels, you build our audience, which helps me get more wonderful guests like Alan. So thank you, everyone, for joining. God bless you, Alan, so much.
God bless you, Lisa. You're doing a great job. Inventors need people like you.
Thank you. It was really fun. I am going to be calling you shortly for some other opportunities to speak together some more. Okay.
Terrific. Nice speaking to you here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.